Hi, everyone, and welcome to the first talk of our StrandTalks series. My name is Ketki, and I'm the Deputy Editor-in-Chief here at Strand.
Hi guys, I'm Shreya and I'm the editor of London and Beyond.
And today we're going to be talking about the cultural effect that social media and digital culture have in our society, on our culture now. And we're going to be going through Shreya's article called The Digicultural Change, the intersection of social culture and social media. So yes, so tell me about like when you started writing it. What did you know you wanted to talk about when you were thinking about digital culture?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I literally had no idea. I was like in bed, it was 6 a.m. when I wrote this because I forgot that I had to do it. And so I was like, okay, digital media like culture, where do I start? And I think for me the first thing that I wanted to do was, I'm definitely like a glass half full kind of person.
Yeah,
So thinking about the effects of social media and like digital technology, I think in my mind, I sort of viewed it as a little bit of a savior in the middle of the pandemic. Because I think before this, like, I'll be honest, I didn't know what Zoom was. I don't know if you did. I had no
I
idea it
had
was a
no
thing.
clue.
And literally, and I thought TikTok was just another fad that I could like avoid. And I think all these things have just like become part of our life. But in a good way, I think there's a lot of like, oh, social media is so bad for you and it's bad for your mental health, and it certainly is. But I think in a way it's definitely sort of connected us and made us feel a bit happier as well. And so I just wanted to touch on what we've achieved as well. I don't think it's necessarily all been doom and gloom. I think it has been, but not all of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think even the years, we can call them pre-pandemic, PP, the years leading up to 2020, we definitely did realize how, intrinsic social media was to like the fabric of our society and how dependent we are, or, the negative effects of social media on mental health. And I think that was all aware, like we were all aware of it. But especially this year, I feel like when everything was stripped away, like social interactions, socializing outside, when all we had was social media, it's like everyone had no choice but to address what it was really like, the effect that it was having. Because personally, like
Exactly.
I went years without really questioning the content I was consuming. And it was only until this year when a lot of influencers or a lot of people were speaking out about, you know, like body image and what type of content we're following, how it impacts us. That's only when I took a step back and I was like, oh my god, this is what I've been consuming since I was a teenager. Like I've never had to think about it. So it's been crazy to like see that. But
Yeah, that's the thing as well. I think being at home has given us just a chance to actually think about everything. And I think that's definitely been really overwhelming because, especially like in London, like as uni students at King's, you're in London and life is busy. Like it's a cliche, but like it is. There's always something going on. And especially as a student, you're always thinking about something. And
exactly.
then, sort of, for me at least, being back home and having to think about all the things that I was missing out on or that I'd done, and actually, because you don't have anything else to do except take it all in.
Exactly.
And so I think, yeah, that was a big thing as well in regards to like how we think about social media and what we consume and how it affects us.
Yeah, and I think like we always thought, we're in contact with people over, social media, but when we have no choice but to just interact socially, I think a lot of people found so many creative ways. Like, do you remember when pub quizzes on Zoom were a thing? And every single week, everyone was like assembling their squad and like group of friends and like doing these quizzes, or they were doing Skype like Halloween costume parties. So I think like so many people were able to get so creative in
Yeah,
how they were socializing online. So it was really cool to see that.
exactly. I think
But
as well there was a lot less judgment about it.
for
Like
sure.
a lot, I feel like people just sort of just immerse themselves. And I think as well, like online dating. Everyone I've spoken
Oh
to
my
now
God, yeah.
has like an online date. And there's no stigma around it because what's the alternative? How else are you meeting people?
Exactly.
How else are you talking?
Yeah, For
It's just
sure.
through like social media and stuff like that. So yes, people have just like gone for it, and I think that's kind of good as well.
But I feel like it's also gone the inverse way where we're seeing like a lot of people inevitably you lose touch with people, or maybe the distance creates problems in certain relationships or friendships, and it's harder to fix because no one's near each other, or no one's really face to face. And I know so many people
Yeah.
like have been so open about the fact that there is a deficit in kind of like compassion and empathy, because you just don't get it on social media when everything's kind of surface level, or you're putting your best face forward, you know?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's a lot of pressure as well
for
for
sure.
everyone to that. But again, that's the sad thing as well, is that at the moment there isn't really an alternative. So
Yeah. But in your article, you touched on, everything that happened over the summer, kind of starting from the murder of George Floyd, and then this collective shift in the world to, you know, amplify underrepresented voices and go online and really hold people accountable online and in person. And we almost saw, I think you wrote, given the social distancing and the isolating conditions of the pandemic, COVID-19 could have been an ideal excuse to brush yet another example of police brutality under the rug, but we didn't. So what did you mean by that when you wrote that?
yeah, I think when I wrote that, basically the whole, obviously the murder of George Floyd was like just horrific. But at the same time, what was sad is that I wasn't necessarily surprised. What I was surprised by was the fact that in the middle of a pandemic, when you had to wear masks and keep 2 feet away, people went out and physically protested. That really surprised me, because I was like, this situation of, actually like legally being told not to be in groups hasn't stopped people from thinking this is absolute like madness, and I'm not gonna let that happen. And people were safe, like it was peaceful, and people wore masks. And I think that's just a credit to, like COVID would have been the perfect excuse to say, hey, I'm not going to protest, we'll just tweet about it and we'll just say that this is bad. But a lot more was done.
Yeah.
And it's not the first time that this has happened, but it's not the first, sorry, I mean, when I say this has happened, I mean it's not the first time that police brutality has existed. But for me, at least in my lifetime, or what I remember, this is the first time that such action has been taken. And the fact that it happened in these sort of circumstances is just amazing to me.
Yeah. And I think that push also came from this refusal to kind of stay quiet and to, kind of, I don't know how to put it, but you put it so correctly when you said push under the rug, because, we could have, like you said, we could have just moved on with our life, or there were other things to focus on, like this health crisis. But I think this, by people protesting it, a lot of people who kind of were against it understood that this is a human rights issue. Like this isn't politics, because I think a lot of people, when they look at maybe activism or social justice issues that kind of spring from social media, because that's where they gain traction, people view it as, oh, it's politics, or like it's just Gen Z and millennials causing issues, when actually it's human rights. And I feel like the fact that people physically went wearing masks, wearing everything protective, and bringing their protests and peaceful protests, I think people really understood it as, wait a second, I need to rethink my analysis of, is this political, or is this actually something that people in this country, obviously in the UK, also get affected by? And I feel like it honestly did, because I saw so many people in the UK kind of talk openly about the fact that we always exclude America. We always say, oh, America's different from the UK, when,
Yeah,
the UK has so much colonial history and
exactly.
examples of racist past that, where I'm like, you can't overlook it. We're not different. But
Exactly. And that's the thing as well. It's like race is often something that, people don't necessarily feel like they need to get involved in because they're not part of that race, or they're not part of that problem. And we saw something completely opposite with that. We saw everyone coming together and saying, like you said, it's a human rights issue. It has nothing to do with Black lives on its own. It's not a case of, this is someone else's problem, or this is an American problem. it was like everyone just sort of was like, this is just absolutely, like, this is not happening anymore. And yeah, I'm just proud to have sort of seen that and been be part of it. I think that's really cool.
And I think you kind of touched on it as well, that like what's so cultural about the event is the fact that different cultural communities were kind of being held accountable and being called out. Like, for example, the South Asian community, like I spoke so much about the fact that even as an Indian person, you know, in the diaspora, like living here, we noticed that like there's so much colorism and racist tendencies and casual racism that's present in our communities that for so long goes unchecked. And suddenly when you have
Yeah.
the whole Black Lives Matter protest like movement, um gain so much traction, you have to rethink the conversations we're having in our families or what you're hearing in your own communities as, you know, brown folk or Indian people or just in general your cultural communities. So like, did you find
So
that
yeah.
was a big thing as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, you know, as a person, and my family were pretty open, and you know, at least in my case, if I have an opinion, I'll certainly share it. So I
Same.
don't necessarily think this. Yeah, exactly. I don't necessarily think it was this that sparked any more conversation for me as opposed to what was already happening. But I think it was great to see that it had for the rest of the world, that I could go on Instagram and see people that,
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
were from the community. And, you know, even now, like my Instagram explore page has so many more South Asians on it. I literally like have never
Yes.
been, I don't know, like I don't know why it's taken, but for my 21 years, I swear to you, I've never seen like any sort of
Honestly.
representation. And now all of a sudden people, and it's nice as well, because it's problems that you think you have in your family are actually the same as everyone. If it's just like someone making a comment about the color of your skin, or like what you look like, or like gender roles, and a lot of it is just entrenched, and I'm not necessarily gonna say, hey, this is gonna change everything, my grandparents are gonna think differently and I can do whatever. But I
Yeah,
think it's still creating a level of awareness that just didn't exist before. And it's
exactly.
interesting as well,
Mm.
because for my sister, like she's 14, and it's interesting as well to see like how that's shaped her perceptions from such a young age. Things I'm learning now and things that I'm seeing now, she's seeing so much younger.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's great. I
No,
think it's just an evolutionary process.
yeah, I totally agree. Like my younger brother's 14 as well. And I remember, you know, during the summer and even now, we have so many conversations. And I was thinking back that when we were 14, like when we were in like year 9, you know,
Yeah.
I don't want to say it wasn't okay to be, you know, your cultural self, but I do feel like I definitely kept, you know, two sides of me separate. Like there was the Indian side or the cultural side, and then there was the kind of side I had at school. And like you said, you're so like, I feel like we don't discuss the like positive impact of like TikTok and these places, because one of the things that's happened is there's so much representation of different cultures. Like for me, what I was so amazed to see was classical dance being so like spotlighted, because like these dances like Bharatanatyam, what is it? Kathak, um, Kuchipudi, like these classical Indian dances. There are so many girls on Instagram who are showing that off. And growing up, I did Bharatanatyam for 3 years, and I was like, I cannot believe that this is like going viral on Instagram, and it's just amazing to see, you know.
Oh, yeah. That's the thing as well, because like you said about how when you were younger you had two identities. For me, I didn't really think about my Indianness until uni. And
Yeah.
even then, like I still don't like all these dances you mentioned. I'll be honest, I don't know them.
Yeah.
And there were so many like things that I wish I knew, and like about my own culture that I just don't know, because I think I spent so long just not thinking it was important, and not
Yeah.
thinking like that I needed to know, or that it would make me feel any different. But I suppose now that I'm older as well, and I'm sort of seeing it, and it's a shame as well, in a way we kind of have to see it to accept that it's important.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
yeah, like I yeah, like I definitely experienced that whole two
Yeah.
identity type thing. And I think a lot of people do. I think, I think it's probably more common than than we think.
People, yeah, or people want to admit, because I feel like growing up, you're always like, no, yeah, so in touch with one side of me, um, and the other side. And then you grow up and you're like, wait a second, I kind of actually did suppress certain things, or I did change certain things about my identity, you know, to fit in, etc. So I do think social media has been incredible. Like, I so agree. And I don't think there's any, like, there's no starting point. Like, you can just, as you live your life, just learn more and more. Um,
Mm.
but it's so incredible because I guess for like your sister or like these younger kids, they're seeing aspects of their culture where maybe they wouldn't have seen it at home because, that's not from their regional, like where they are regionally or geographically. They're seeing it on social media, and, you can just engage with it, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, my sister definitely is much more in touch with with all of what I was, and I think a lot of that is to do with the internet and social media, and I guess just finding your community, knowing that it exists in the first place is such a big.
For sure. And you also mentioned that with um, you know, TikTok trends and social media kind of like the common posts we see on our feed, the fact that we could use it for different protests like Black Lives Matter, and now the farmers protest that everyone's kind of speaking up about in Punjab, you can kind of like, it's social media is more meaningful than just trends.
Yeah.
So that's what you wrote. Like, do you think that we will ever escape the kind of trend mindset or like an algorithm to like just really, have change?
Yeah, I don't know if we'll ever escape it, just because I think that's also just been tied down to, how our generation is defined, in that we're, as people, like as young people, we're constantly just sort of seeking instant gratification. And I think this whole trend culture is why a lot of people sort of think we're not necessarily hardworking, or like we're snowflakes and we're fragile, and 1 minute we're really into one thing and then we move on. And I'll admit, I can definitely be like that. I
Yeah.
am like, I have a short attention span, and I don't doubt it's because 1 minute one thing's popular and the next minute it's not. But I think as well, like, this has taught us, like, even though we have trends and even though like we enjoy them, I don't think there's anything wrong with like a good TikTok dance. There is much
Exactly.
more to it. Like, some things, like, I think the point was that even though some things are a trend, they shouldn't be.
Mm.
Racism, systematic racism, shouldn't be. Like, Black Lives Matter, and the farming protest, and all these things that we experience. I think the point was, yeah, you think that this is all a trend, but it shouldn't be a trend. And I think that was what was like powerful about it. I think it was acknowledging the fact that we've been defined by trends and constantly changing our minds and moving on very quickly, but that's not the case, and that shouldn't be the case. If it is, then we're going to actively make sure it's not. So I
Yeah.
thought that was good.
And what you said, like, it brought me back to our earlier point about the fact that, everyone's on social media. I think it also reminded people that, yes, all of this change is being presented on social media. It's being kind of rallied on social media, but there's real people behind everything that's going on. And like, I know there were so many posts and, so much talk about the fact that there are real people in our neighborhoods and our communities that have been, experiencing this for years. There's Black people, there's, uh, minority people everywhere, that this isn't a new thing. Like, when over the summer, the fact that this is all happening and people
Yeah.
are super into it and super, on trend to protest and talk about it. I I I I think we did have to remember that, this isn't a passing thing, because there are people attached at the end of these trends. And it's the same with like things like cultural appropriation. Like, what do you remember when everyone was wearing bindis and the Coachella vibes? And I remember everyone was just like, oh, it's a trend, it goes by every summer. And then you remember that there's actually people, or like a whole cultural community attached to that back home, that you have to consider. But
And I think, like, COVID brought out a whole different side, because at the beginning there was a lot of hostility towards East Asians just because COVID existed. And I remember, this is going to sound really naive, I was on the train And this was the first time I'd really seen like racism happen like up front. And there was this guy that was just verbally abusing an East Asian man. And I remember like, I mean, this is probably me just because I'm very sheltered, but I hadn't actually seen that before. And I was just
Yeah.
like, what kind of nonsense? Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And so, yeah, I definitely think just the existence of COVID has changed people's perceptions. And even though it's not necessarily being tweeted anymore, I think it's changed the way that people think. I think that's the most important thing.
For sure. And the fact that, you were so with East Asians, I feel like what was so strange to me or to a lot of people was the fact that that was so normalized, yet
Yeah.
other comments or other ways of speaking were not like were not were allowed. Yeah, were
Yeah.
allowed. So I guess it was a thing that wait a second, like as a society, are we turning blind eyes on certain people? And like it's never a hierarchy. And I think it's so, every minority person knows it's not a hierarchy. I think the ultimate goal is just, you know, setting a boundary of how do you speak to me? How are
Yeah.
you respecting me? Are do I have basic human rights? So I think, I remember there's a activist I follow, or he's an illustrator, but he's very vocal about especially East Asian um
Right.
issues, and is I think it's Ji Sube on Instagram. And I love, like, because he's so frank and he's so honest, and he's like, beginning of 2020, all of you were applauding Bong Joon-ho. You were like, all of you were so excited about Parasite and Korean representation and Asian representation at the Oscars, and 6 months later you're all saying that we eat bats and we're during COVID. And it's astounding that he's calling this out and people don't realize it. But yeah.
Such a good point as well, because like with Parasite, like that was for, I think I remember someone saying like that not necessarily a new film, but the minute Hollywood sort of decided that it was good, it blew up. And it's just this thing of, do we need someone else to validate another culture or another sort of perspective for us to accept that it's worth hearing? And like you said, it's not a hierarchy, it's not a linear process, but it's just acknowledging that this is what it is, this is what's happening, and this is how we think. Just acknowledging its existence and how it affects you is such a big step anyway. And I just, yeah, it's just one of those things that winds me up, but at least something's happening about it, slowly but surely.
Yeah. And I think it's all parts of like we're talking about social media now, but it's so present in like fashion, where you see different, different models of different ethnicities only being casted if they fit this Eurocentric model or this Eurocentric gaze. And we're saying, what you want diversity, you want representation, yet
Yeah.
it's your definition of it. Yeah, it's like the same idea of diversity and inclusion, the difference between it. You want diversity, but there's no inclusion, so what are you really achieving here? And I do think, like, if we're talking about a digital age or a digital kind of culture, I think what is so side by side to that is hustle culture. And I know we have so many articles discussing this because as a student, like, this is literally one part of our life. But this whole idea that even in a pandemic, a literal pandemic, we have this need to like do the most that we can and be the most productive. And I think that is beneficial, like the idea of doing something you really enjoy, because that is like your creative release, that's your expression, that is all valid. But I do think I felt such a pressure to kind of show up and like still work at the same pace that I was working 2 years ago in
Yeah.
this year, when it's okay that I couldn't, or it's okay that people take a break and they don't do that. But
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think hustle culture, it's actually funny because one of the things that I started, like when I lost my internship, I created a little project for my friend called On Our Minds, and it was all about like mental health and stuff. So go and check out our Instagram if you want. A little shameless plug there.
linked
But
here.
we spoke about hustle. Exactly. I'm gonna just add things. But we spoke about hustle culture because for me, like, that's definitely this past month in particular, like I just felt like I was constantly waking up and working, and I felt guilty for not doing it because I said this to my friend. I was like, it's not like I have anything else to do. It's not like I can go out and get a coffee with a friend or do anything. So if I'm downstairs watching TV, I'm like, but I may as well just work, because what else am I going to do? And I think like there's definitely added pressure, because it's easy to compare yourself anyway. But then when you're at home and you're not doing anything else, to just burn yourself out because you feel like that's what you have to do. And yeah, I think hustle culture is something that the pandemic has definitely accelerated. But again, before the pandemic, was anyone even speaking about hustle culture? No. So while it's accelerated it, we're still acknowledging it to a certain extent. And I think it's kind of like a give and take.
Yeah, and what you said is so true. Every person's different. So what, is there productive? It's not going to look the same. We're all
Yeah.
doing different degrees. We're all following different career paths. So what is productive to someone won't be for you, or what kind of time schedule works for one person just doesn't work for you because you have a different job and such. And I wanted to say, as the London and Beyond editor, with everything going on in London, like as we speak, it's in tier 4. It's changing. I don't even want to say for how long, because it can change literally day by day. We're nearing Christmas. Everyone's finding it difficult. People are probably finding it difficult to cope, or their plans are changing. So what do you think, kind of, in terms of London and also beyond, what people can do within, in before the end of the year and the beginning of next year, to kind of improve their relationship with social media and kind of like live their best digital lives? It's a big question.
It is a big question, but I think in terms of like living your best life with social media, I think it's just being conscious about what you consume, and also be conscious about when you're consuming it. Because for me, I think the pandemic definitely raised a lot of like anxiety issues and stress issues for a lot of people, and I think social media can become kind of like a crutch. Like if I was feeling stressed, I would turn to Instagram and stuff, and that would make me feel better for the short term, but ultimately it's part of the problem, because you don't even realize the effect that it's having on you. So I think go through, like, it's a cliche, but genuinely go through and just unfollow people that don't bring you joy. Do one of those
Yeah.
sort of cleansing, and just delete it as well for a little while. That's what I do. Sometimes I like to I'm just in one of those
Run.
funks or moods where I'm like, I'm just deleting Instagram, or I'm putting my phone on flight mode. Flight mode, yeah, that's
Yeah, flight mode. Do not
I was like,
disturb.
wait.
Yeah.
And yeah, stuff like that. I think little things like that really do help. And I think as well it helps you gain a bit of control, because for me, I definitely felt like, okay, so this is all just happening to me. I can't do anything about it. But you can, if you want, like, you can definitely try and gain some control. And I think, yeah, that sort of thing helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose those
That's amazing. I mean, for me, literally the same as you, but also kind of live this sounds really abstract, but what I kind of mean is live your life, l- apply what you're doing on social media in real life. And what I mean is, everyone says that about activism, of course. Not even activism. If you're outspoken on social media, I hope that you're just as outspoken in real life. Or if you're conscious about something on social media, or you're preaching about it, I hope you're practicing that in real life and you're continuing to apply that in your own community. But I also mean that, like, I find it's so easy to kind of double tap someone's photo, like, comment on their photos, and just be so super quick with my interactions, that maybe I could, take that 1 hour I spend on social media and maybe like phone someone. And I know I sound like literally a grandma when I say, like, I'm gonna phone someone and actually ask them, but I'm like, maybe if you DM people a lot, maybe take that time and, email them, or not email them, oh my god, call them. You can tell I'm like
do something. Yeah, no, you're right, because I think as well there's a lot less, like I said, shame about, like, it's not, people are doing that now, like it's not as awkward as before in a way. Like, I think the thing is, like, you get worried that it seems random, but the chances are that person's going to be so excited that you've thought of them.
exactly.
Like, if someone called me and just said, hey, I just thought of you, and I thought, like, how flattered would you be? Like, that's such a
Exactly.
so the
And it's
chances
like, yeah. And especially in a time where we're like finding finding out about everyone's projects, online. Everyone's busy. I mean, no one's at uni or at a workplace. Kind of everyone's personal affairs are kind of, you get updated online. I guess for me, I'm like, okay, next time someone announces something, or they post about, let's say, an article, I'm like, instead of DMing them like, oh, read it, loved it, I could like maybe give them like a 20-minute call and be like, oh, I really like this, like, how are you doing, etc. That would be like that's my goal, not my tip. Like, I have to practice that first, but
yeah. No, I love that. It can be like people's New Year's resolution, because I think it's scary as well. Like, that's really out of people's comfort zones.
it is. Oh my gosh.
Really,
I get stressed when I have to call like the optician, because I'm like, I don't know how to converse. I don't know how to call anyone anymore. Like, can I text you? It's so bad, but yeah,
no,
for sure.
but it'll be worth
exactly. But it was so nice talking to you about your article, and hopefully we'll tag everything below, and the new issue will be out where you can read Shreya's article on social and digital culture. And yeah, it was amazing talking to you. Have a lovely Christmas, an amazing New Year.
Hopefully it'll be good.
Yeah. Mid tier 4, no tears left to cry, all that. But yeah, see you next year.
Thank you.